comes to these politicians, it might be hard to give each one of them an individual ranking. I don't know how closely you follow the political horse race. I tend to avoid getting too deep into that. But if we were to try more of the ordinal ranking in the style of Austrian economics, and we were to put the major Republican candidates who are out there, so we have Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, Ted Cruz. We talked about Rand Paul. Let's see. There's just starting off with those. Do any of them strike you as being particularly high or low on that list?
Well, it's interesting because naturally, if you're going to compare the Republican candidates, you might as well look at the Democratic candidates as well.
Sure.
And here you get this anomaly that, like, take Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Sanders is pretty goddamn good on foreign policy. Not pretty goddamn good, very good, excellent, magnificent. He's as good as Chomsky, or as good as Ron Paul. Ron Paul, not Rand Paul. So you have to give him good marks for that. On the other hand, Bernie Sanders is a commie. I mean, he's horrible on economics and personal liberties. So, what do you do? How do you do this? All you say is, well, I think what I just said. And, the question comes, well, Martin O'Malley and Hillary and Bernie Sanders, I think, are the three candidates for Democrat. And let's take every other candidate for the Republican apart from Rand Paul, who I put a little higher. Now, who do I put higher? The Democrat or the Republican? Now, remember, I'm a libertarian, and I don't like this left-right thing. The Democrats are left and the Republicans are right, and that's the only way that we can look at it. The way I see politics, it's really a three-legged stool. And the Democrats are on one leg and the Republicans are on another leg. And we libertarians are on the third leg. Mm-hmm. And we're equidistant from those guys. A lot of people think, we should have some sort of conservative libertarian thing. And the Federalist Society has got libertarians and conservatives. And there were people at National Review that were trying to amalgamate paleo libertarians and what have you. The way I see it, we're equidistant from both of those guys. So I have to give both equally bad mark. Let's give them both a 45. That is the average Democrat, the three I mentioned, plus the average Republican, apart from Rand Paul. And there are about 15 or 20 of them now. I'd give them all, a 45 or a 50 or something like that. Now, the Republicans are a little bit better on free enterprise, but none of them really want to get rid of the minimum wage law. Even Rand Paul, God bless him, just doesn't want to raise the minimum wage, but he didn't have the courage to say, we got to get rid of the minimum wage. None of the, even Rand Paul doesn't. Now, Milton Friedman is good on this about this latest thing with the, what do you call it? The free trade agreement that, bless him, my man Barack Obama is trying to push through.
Trans-Pacific Partnership or
TPP, right. Yeah. Right. Now, Milton Friedman, God bless him, said, the hell with these, if I could put words in his mouth, and I'm doing it in a way I think he would agree. We don't want to have NAFTA and CAFTA and TPP and all that. Let's have a unilateral declaration of free trade with every country like Hong Kong did when Hong Kong was more independent. And if other countries want to have tariff against us, let them have it. But we won't have any tariffs against them. Now, that would be the libertarian view on free trade, and Milton Friedman would be 100% behind that, but Rand Paul wouldn't. And certainly the other Republicans would. And say the minimum wage, Milton Friedman would say, yeah, get rid of the whole thing. I would go a little further and say put in jail the people responsible for it, but that's a whole other issue. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm going to give the average Republican candidate and the average Democratic candidate the same mark, somewhere 35, 25 out of 100. Namely, they're all bad. The Democrats are slightly better on foreign policy, especially Bernie Sanders, although Hillary, I don't think, is any different than Jeb Bush. Mm-hmm. She's a militarist horror. And on personal liberties, maybe the Republicans are a little bit better, like, the conservatives are better on political correctness and things like that. I have to give Rush Limbaugh and Hannity credit on those things, like forcing the baker to bake a cake for the lesbian couple or the male homosexual couple. The conservatives are much better on those kind of issues than on the Democrats. So it's sort of a mixed bag on, but on labor unions, the Democrats are worse. So it's sort of hard to say. And I would say that if I want to keep equidistant from both of them, I'm going to award both of them about the same mark, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, because he's really, really good on foreign policy. So I have to give him, I don't know, a 55 and the rest the 45 or 35 or something like that.
Okay, so after Rand Paul, it's Bernie Sanders, followed by the rest of them just straggling behind the pack.
I guess, and we should also mention Gary Johnson, who ran for the Libertarian Party last time and probably will win in 2016, become the Libertarian candidate. I put him and Rand Paul in the same group, although initially I put them both at 70, and I demoted Rand Paul. I haven't demoted Gary Johnson because I haven't heard him speak much. But, he favored intervention in Africa, and he favored some sort of fair tax, and he has deviations too. So he's pretty good. I mean, a 70 is pretty good, and I would give him a 70. But I would favor Rand Paul at 65 over Gary Johnson at 70 if Rand Paul got the Republican nomination and Gary Johnson got the Libertarian nomination, because I think that the Republican has got a much better chance of winning. Mm-hmm. So I would support Rand against Gary. But, if I were Gary and Rand got it, I would call Rand on the phone and say, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to support you, or do you want me to fight to show there's a difference? Whatever you want me to do, I'll do, because I want you to win.
Well, yeah, I think it's an astute observation that, the way that the media tends to filter, I think, libertarianism, they will equate a position that says that people should not be coerced into a certain action as the endorsement or rejection of the action itself. So you mentioned a minute ago something like baking a cake for a lesbian couple. This is an issue where I think people will be misunderstood commonly, and I know you've had a lot of your comments taken out of context in the past. What do you think it is that gives rise to that view that if you don't think that something should be coerced, then people assume that you believe that it is automatically. Let's see, I'm getting a little confused as to, I'm not sure if you understand the thrust of the question.
It's sort of like saying, if we favor legalization of prostitution, do we favor prostitution?
Right.
No, there's a difference between favoring the legalization of cocaine and favoring cocaine. And libertarians only favor the legalization of victimless crimes. We don't necessarily have to favor doing these things themselves. Libertarians can be conservative in the sense of, their personal lives. They don't favor using a prostitute or being a prostitute or using heavy drugs or what have you. So that's a very, very important point you're making, that we must distinguish between favoring the thing itself, which libertarians need not do, and favoring the legalization of the victimless crime between consenting adults, not for children, but for consenting adults. And that's a crucial distinction, and one that you made very well.
Well, I think we got through the politicians a little bit quicker than I was expecting doing the ordinal ranking, and so that gives us time to touch on one more libertarian who will certainly wear that label, and that's David Boaz, who I consider to be a friend, and I admire a lot of the work that he does with the Cato Institute, but I know that you've had your disputes with him as well, and I wanted to briefly let you touch on that and give him the ranking and explain why he doesn't quite stack up to some of these other thinkers we've talked about.
Well, he's got to be up at 85 or somewhere. I mean, he's really good on many, many things, but he's got a few deviations. One, I think, it was almost like a typographical error on his part, but he wouldn't apologize for it. And he said something like he yearned back for the days of Clinton, or I forget who it was, compared to the present days, because in those days we would drop bombs from 50,000 feet on the bad guys or on whoever, the foreigners. I forget who he said. And we didn't have any U.S. boots on the ground, and therefore U.S. soldiers weren't in danger. And I wrote a piece saying, hey, wait a second, that's not libertarian. Dropping bombs on innocent people from 50,000 feet, that's supposed to be good? And I called him on that. And then his friend Tom, what's
Palmer?
his Tom Palmer said that I was an idiot. I misunderstood him. Uh, that he was just kidding. But it didn't seem to me he was kidding. And if he was kidding, he should have wrote I was kidding. But he never wrote anything like that. And Tom Palmer was saying I'm a jerk for criticizing Dave Bose on that issue. But I think I justifiably criticized him on that issue. Another weakness of Dave Bose is this thing about homosexuals, that you can't discriminate against homosexuals. Well, to me, the essence of libertarianism is free association. You should be able to discriminate against anyone. Look, heterosexuals are evil because they rule out half the human race. Male heterosexuals rule out other men as a bed partner, love partner, romantic partner. Female heterosexuals rule out other women. So they discriminate against half the human race. But the dirty, rotten male homosexuals also rule out or prejudice against half the human race, namely females. And lesbians are equally guilty of discrimination, namely they discriminate against all men. The logical implication is that the only good people are bisexuals. So what? We have to have compulsory bisexuality because bisexuals do not discriminate against either gender.
Well, you're talking about a preference for the partner, but if we're talking about, let's say, let's make it more concrete with the example. So, someone who discriminates. Give us an example of a form of discrimination against homosexuals that you would favor on the grounds. And we should be clear again, in case the New York Times is listening, like you're saying, we should be clear that this is neither an endorsement nor a rejection of necessarily the underlying. What's an example of discrimination that you think should be legal, whether or not it corresponds to the morally appropriate position?
Right. I'm glad you made that distinction. We're not talking morality. We're talking what the law should be. Well, what the law should be is if I open a bakery and I put a sign, no blacks, no Jews, no left-handed people, no non-follically challenged people like you, only follically challenged people like me, no blacks, no gays, no this, no that. It should be legal. Now, I think it's a little despicable, but we're not discussing that. We're just discussing the legality of it, and I think it should be legal to discriminate against anyone. And Dave Bose would not go along with this. So to that extent, he is really not a libertarian. Now, again, we're not talking about whether you should discriminate. What we're talking about is whether it should be legal to discriminate. And I say it should be legal to discriminate. I find it abhorrent, but that's just my personal taste.
Yeah. I think that's is the key point that so often gets missed, and I'm glad that we were able to take that little diversion there. And the last one that I have on my list, just for fun, is our good friend Bob Zadek. Where does he go on this list?
Well, just before him, I just wanted to get one lick in against the the bisexuals. They also discriminate. They discriminate on the basis of lookism, namely beauty and sense of humor and intelligence and other things that everyone discriminates on. So even they are no better than they should be. Okay, now Bob Zadek is a good guy. I know nothing of any deviation of his. So as far as I really haven't studied him. I haven't listened to just a few of his interviews, and he's been very good. I haven't read any of his writings. So as far as I'm concerned, he's at 100. That's what I say to my students in the first day of class. You're all running 100. You haven't done anything wrong yet. So Bob Zadek and anyone else about whom I'm not as knowledgeable as I could be, they all start at 100. And then when they deviate, we reduce their grade. So my man Bob Zadek is 100% right now.
All right.
What's that, Bob? I'm looking at you, boy.
Yeah. Fortunately, as you say, every dog gets its what is it?
One bite.
One bite. And if our viewers are interested in learning more about the philosophy of libertarianism, I would invite them to visit bobzadek.com and follow us in iTunes or on Facebook, Twitter. We have dozens or hundreds of archived interviews with prominent thinkers, people like Walter Block, who can explain how this libertarian philosophy applies in different areas. And I think that there will be many more opportunities, hopefully in the future, for you to come on the show, and we will welcome that.
I'll be glad to. It's always fun. You guys are great.
Thanks so much for joining me, Walter, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Take care of yourself.
Thanks.
Bye.